Second half, Celtic put Dundee to the sword. Rio Hatate returns in time for Kyogo to step up in Europe. This is the Celtic Exchange Weekly. This is Tino, and this week I'm joined by Miff and James as we cover all things Celtic. Miff, a game of two halves on Saturday, but all came good eventually. How big a boost is it to have Rio Hatate back in action?
Hello Tino, hello James, hello listeners. It is a massive boost, and I think you couldn't have got any better visual evidence than his cameo on Saturday. Just the difference in the energy in the stadium as soon as he walked on the park, and more importantly the difference in energy in the team as soon as he walked on the park. And that's not to say I know Turnbull's come in for a bit of stick, but ultimately he has won and converted the penalty that then allowed Hatate to come on the park and play in the manner that he did. So I know that whilst I understand there has been James, you'll get your bit, you'll get your bit. Whilst there has been a bit of criticism coming his way, understandably so, I still think it was a notable contribution for him as well.
Yeah, James, I know you're keen to get in, I can hear it, but just on Rio Hatate, before we touch on Turnbull if you want, he never scored, he never assisted, but there is no doubt he brings just huge influence to those around him. We spoke just a wee bit actually just before coming on the mics. He kind of unlocks players around him, Callum McGregor, maybe Lewis Palmer, bringing him into the fold as well, and he's just got such a positive influence on the Celtic side.
Yeah, it's a real fluidity that he brings. You can just see people a bit more open, a bit more able to try things that they wouldn't try when things are a bit more static. He's so dynamic, he can be in a lot of places, he frees up so many players. It's a huge boost for tomorrow night. I feel an awful lot better going into that game with Hatate fully fit. If he is fully fit, I hope he is.
Yep. In addition to Hatate, what we've also got is a guy in Matt O'Reilly who's absolutely flying. I've mentioned it a couple of times now. I think he's potentially in the best form of his Celtic career. You and I covered it in a bit of detail on the final whistle show after the game there over at the Celtic Exchange Plus, and he just seems to be playing with a freedom and dare I say the old cliched smile on his face. He's in a good place, isn't he?
He is. That is with a smile on his face, and that's. It's testament to Rodgers, to be fair. He's just enjoying his football. I don't know if you saw, there was a clip of him and Alistair Johnson just immediately post-match on the final whistle, and they were just laughing and joking about, and he just seems like, not that he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he seems lighter nonetheless, and his football's benefiting from it.
Yeah. Miff, are you concerned in any way, shape or form just about the first half? I was reluctant to use the word turgid on the final whistle show, but it certainly wasn't dynamic, exciting, free-flowing. Completely different story second half, especially when Hatate came on. But it was a bit of a shift, wasn't it?
At the risk of this sounding premeditated, I put in the lads' group chat at half-time that it was cha-cha slide football.
Which means?
Slide to the left, slide to the right. Take it back now, y'all. And it was a bit the same as the St Johnstone game, in the sense that the intent was there, but the execution was poor, and it was pedestrian, it was slow. Now, it was not often you'll say this, but the exception to that rule on Saturday was Dyson Maeda. I thought he was really effective. I thought his contributions were noteworthy. And the save that the keeper's made is coincidental because he's hit the shot that well for close range that it's just bounced back off Carson. But it was excellent skill in a really tight space, and I know Tino in particular is quite critical of Maeda's supposed lack of technical ability, but I thought he demonstrated a huge amount in that.
Also known as his actual lack of technical ability.
No, I'm not.
Look, he's finished for the offside goal.
I know, finished for the offside goal as well. Tino's just, he's a bad man, James.
Go.
But I thought it was, oh no, here we go, more of the same, to be quite frank, after sitting through the St Johnstone game. So it was refreshing to see. Yeah, it was always going to need a goal just to kind of break the shackles off, and after that, it was fantastic. The second and third goals are absolutely fantastic. And I know you don't want me to go off on any tangents tonight, but I'm just going to, obviously, I didn't listen to post-match because, as you know, when I'm not involved, I'm not the least bit interested. But on the bus, there was a bit of debate about who man of the match was, because BBC website gave it to Dyson Maeda. On the bus, the lads were giving it to Liam Scales.
What?
They drink a lot of Buckfast. And then I had said Alistair Johnson. I thought Alistair Johnson was clearly man of the match for me.
Matt O'Reilly for me.
Matt O'Reilly for me, but in the stadium it was
I didn't
Kyogo.
say who the best looking was, I said who was man of the match.
There's the thing, isn't it? It just shows you how subjective football is, because stadium gave it to Kyogo. I think most of us beyond that give it to O'Reilly. Johnson's definitely got a shout. my head on scales is a different story. But I suppose in a positive way, it's shown that a few players are finding their feet after some sketchy early season form.
Just on the point of scales, I was a bit like, he done all right game, but when you actually watch the highlights back, a couple of through balls, he threw ball for Maeda, and also I think it was one in the second half as well. I think
he clipped into Turnbull.
It was Turnbull. So when I watched it back, I'm like, right, I can see why now. And he did defend well as well.
Just in terms of finalising the chat in the game before we move on, definitely the cliched game of two halves. Is a little wonder though when you've got a first half with a debutant in Phillips who was finding his feet, Turnbull who just slows the game down, there's no getting away from it, and Yang who's still trying a few things and getting used to the way we play. When you then add the energy, Lagerbielke done fairly well as well when he came in, but that aside, you add the energy of Hatate and Louis Palmer who was clearly in to impress. You just lift those energy levels. But the bottom line is, James, you bring in good players, you get results, don't you? And good players make things happen. Yeah,
we've been seeing this for a few weeks now. There's maybe just a wee bit of a tendency to overstate the early season form. But when you're looking at 6 top quality players not in the team, as soon as you start to get 1, 2, 3 of those, which we've got now, and then it'll be 4, 5, 6 before we know it, it's going to be totally different. It's already different, the way we finished that match on Saturday and the way that hopefully we start the game Tuesday night. And then you get the other guys coming back through October. I'm pretty comfy and confident where we're going. Just on that, I'd seen somebody done a piece, I think it was Tony McLaughlin, Celtic Trends.
Yeah, Tony, friend of the show.
And it was a comparison between Yang and Palmer. But I think that's quite harsh because I thought Yang was taking more risks, whereas Palmer I thought played it he tried a couple of runs initially, but then he played it quite safe. After that, when he came on, he looks an absolute unit, by the way. I need to say that. He looks a big bit of a boy.
Yang?
But Palmer.
Both of them?
But with Yang, I really like Yang. I think he'll do for me. He's really, really positive. He always just looks to go, his instincts just to go at the full-back. He doesn't look to play safe most of the time. He looks to try and take somebody on as soon as he gets the ball. I love him.
Yeah, I'd also say for, and Tony's great at his stats as well, but it's much harder to deliver stats when you're trying to get the lead than when you are ahead. If you come on, you're already one up. The team's starting to play with a bit of fluidity.
No, it's not. It's certainly not. I dig it, Tony. It was just I thought it was harsh to compare or
that's what I'm saying. It's harsh on Yang because he's doing it.
He's trying to actually create something. Yeah. I said to the boys that he'll do for me. Yeah. He looks really positive.
I think he'll start tomorrow
really positive.
Yeah. What's your problem with Tony?
I think Tony's excellent.
No, it's good stuff, but it is interesting. The game changes, doesn't it? You get into a second half, you get a couple of goals lead, and it starts to open out the game. Dundee's game plan's all up in the air, and stats can tell you so much. And there was an interesting stat, I think, from Palmer's 30 minutes compared to Yang's 60 minutes. Palmer's made X amount of more passes into space, but the game's opened up by that point, and it's maybe easier to make those passes. Yeah, lots to be said. We need to move on for the game, but my last point I'd like to make is on Joe Hart, because listen, he's had the stick at the start of the season, and I think he deserves the credit. Certainly for his one big save towards the end of the first half, where he's just made himself big and prevented what looked a certain goal, and also the credit that he rightly gets for what he done at Ibrox. So he's a guy that in long spells doesn't get involved in games, but when he has to step up, he does. And he'll do it for this season.
If you add that up now, that's 3 games between St Johnstone, Ibrox and Saturday when they made the save, that he's had a real marked effect on Celtic being able to take something for each game.
Yeah.
3 clean sheets as well.
Top quality performers and top quality players respond to pressure and to criticism, and Heart's that.
Yeah, it's good to see. Okay, let's take a look at what's coming up on this week's show. With another goal and an assist on Saturday, Kyogo has picked up exactly where he left off last season, but the one thing missing from his time at Celtic so far is a solid goals return in Europe. Are we now about to see our Japanese talisman step up to that particular plate? Saturday we can redo this bit, Dave. Saturday saw 3 new boys make their debuts in the hoops, and we take a closer look at Nat Phillips, Lewis Palmer and Paulo Bernardo and discuss what they might bring to the party this season. Then it's time for the 11th man as the boys try to name the missing man from a well-known Celtic lineup. And finally, with this week's return to the Champions League, we'll look at what would be classed as success from this season's European adventures. Okay, let's get the ball rolling with a discussion on Kyogo and what's now needed if he's to be remembered as one of our top strikers of the modern era. First of all though, Miff, what about his contribution against Dundee on Saturday? Another goal, another assist.
Absolutely fantastic, and considering that he'd take up the tunnel for a bit of treatment as well, clearly, I think he's fantastic. Just a phenomenal striker to watch, and someone who when you watch him live, I think you probably get just a better appreciation of him. Just how hard he works for the team, how often he makes runs, and how selfless he is in making those runs, because if he doesn't get the ball, he doesn't remonstrate with his teammates, he just goes right back in and does it again. I think he already does go down as a mod. I don't think if you score doubles at Hampden against Rangers in cup finals and semi-finals, you're down as a modern great as far as I'm concerned. I think the case is closed on that.
You don't think he needs European achievements to cement it?
It would be nice, but then if you're comparing him with Larsson,
I'd say more to Gary Hooper, for example. Got some good goals.
Don't worry, James, we've got a Larsson comparison coming up. We'll go right for the big guns.
You know, my love for Gary Hooper is well documented. Mm-hmm. However, I mean, Kyogo's just Kyogo for me is in a different league for Gary Hooper.
Yeah,
different player.
James, just looking at Saturday specifically, so his goal and his assist. We've done a couple of shows recently there post match, and we watched Celtic have put a really good 360 degree view of the goals. It's a kind of unique angle thing, but you can watch from various different angles, and it's great if you just want to study a top striker. And I think it's Joe Shaughnessy, the centre half for Dundee. There's just an image that you can see, or an angle that you can see where it's like, I've got him. As a centre half, he has got him. He's in his range, and he turns away for a split second, and Kyogo's off, and he's right in the back of him. He's timed the run to perfection. Calmack knows that run's coming. And it's one thing making that run and getting on the end of the ball. You've then still got a fair bit of work to do to divert that past what's a decent keeper in Trevor Carson. And it's just a really deft flick of the head to put it into the top of the net. And I suppose my point on that, out with the run and the finish, is that he scores all types of goals, James. Headers, tap-ins, volleys, edge of the box, inside the box. He put one on his chest one time against Aberdeen, if you remember, early in the rain. In terms of finishing, he's got it all.
He has. I mean, I don't think there's any dissenting voices of any Celtic fan I know. He's a joy to watch. It's such a unique talent, being able to make that movement and read that ball that's coming in from McGregor, whilst knowing exactly where the centre half is and where the goalie is, so he knows that when he lands, if Carson had gone to cover the near post where Kyogo scored, he'd have put it the other side. He knows exactly where Carson is and where the best probability chance of scoring is, and he's slipped his defender beautifully. I mean, I don't like the Larsson comparisons because that's just silly, because Larsson was a unique thing. The stars aligned and we got a world-class player for 7 years. That's just Henrik on his own, but you can compare him with all the others that came after for sure, and he's probably top there.
I'm glad you don't like Larsson comparisons, because I've got a section here all about it.
20 minutes on it.
Next up is the Henrik Larsson-Kyogo comparison. So you might have seen some of the stats doing the rounds, but somebody's compiled the figures for Larsson and Kyogo after 88 games at Celtic. So Kyogo's now 89
Hooper's
games.
Number.
Hooper's number, that's right, but by the by. Okay, so the stats read as follows. So minutes played, Larsson after 88 games, 7,556 minutes versus Kyogo 5,795, so a lot less minutes per game. That'll have come about through things like Giacomakis spelling in and out for him. Larsson played as part of a front two, rarely substituted, so certainly more minutes for Larsson. Goals, very interestingly, both on 57 after 88 games, 57 exactly. European goals, Larsson had 4 at that stage, Kyogo's got 5. Goals against Rangers, 3 for Larsson across 8 games. Kyogo's now got 6 against Rangers across 9 games. Larsson pips it definitely in terms of assists, though. He's got 19 assists versus 11. And overall, minutes per goal, Larsson's won every 132 minutes, whereas Kyogo is won every 101 minutes. Now, you can make stats do whatever you want, James. There's obviously different ways you can spin that. The big thing about Larsson, of course, moving forward beyond these 88 games, was the longevity. He'd done it for 7 years at Celtic. He scored 242 goals in the process, so there's a long way for Kyogo to go to reach those levels. Although he has signed a long-term deal, he could be here for 7 seasons. But the very fact that we're having the conversation about is he as good as Larsson or anywhere near that, got to be a positive, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, like you say, he's got the long-term deal there, so he's got the time to try and emulate it. I think it was in season 3 that Larsson really, started moving. He scores 53 goals that season. Is that right? Something like that. So not that Larsson had a slow start, not that Kyogo's had a slow start, but Larsson did accelerate at one point, so he's got to watch for that point of acceleration and match that too. They're different players, but they both score those very, very different goals. Put the ball anywhere and I'll find a way to score it. I need to see him scoring an almost at the byline cut in at Ibrox. That'll do me.
That'll be next on his list. If I don't want to spend too long on the question, I know a lot of other channels have covered it in a bit of detail, but just to put it to you directly, is he the best since Larsson? You've also got to look at, what's his competition for that particular title. So it's guys like Moussa Dembele, Odsonne Edouard, Gary Hooper, I know you're a big fan, Samaras, Venegoor of Hesselink, Tony Stokes, Lee Griffiths, Vakun Bayo, Patrick Klamala, all these guys. Anyone I might have missed. I think Kyogo's...
Scott McDonald would be in the mix.
Okay, I'll give you that. But Kyogo's better than all of them, isn't he? Scott McDonald included.
Yes.
But I don't think there's any debate, is there?
No. Edward and Dembele were phenomenal for us. Good to see Eddie's kind of kicked on again for Hodgson come back.
Scored at the weekend.
I scored again at the weekend. Edward was a frightening talent, but I think we all knew we were watching somebody that was developing into an excellent talent but would leave.
Yeah.
Similar with Dembele, I think we all felt probably a bit like Larson. We were lucky to kind of get him the way we did, and we knew he was going to go into bigger and better things. I think he's probably underachieved compared to the amount of talent that he has, to be fair.
Yeah, I think there's a underlying fitness issue there.
But so for those reasons, we've got Kyogo at his prime. Yep, he's phenomenal.
Yeah. I've given you some stats here after 88 games, but just to confirm his totals for Celtic now. So 89 appearances, 58 goals, 12 assists. Overall, it's 70 goal contributions in 89 appearances. But here's the angle I'm coming at here in terms of the European stuff, which I think to a huge extent is lacking at this moment in time, and you can question how valid it is or not. European-wise, he's had 15 appearances in total, 5 goals, 4 assists. The 15 appearance it breaks down is 6 in the Champions League last season, of which he just got 1 assist. That was against Leipzig. There's 5 Europa group games from the season prior in which he got 2 goals and 3 assists. And he's also got 4 European qualifiers. That was against Jablonec and AZ Alkmaar. He's got 3 goals from then. So decent returns, okay, not a disaster by any stretch. But James, I feel that if he's going to start getting spoken about alongside Larsson or anyone else of that ilk, you need to add goals at the top level. I think Larsson is still the top scorer in UEFA Cup history / Europa League history, which is something special in itself. And we're not asking him to reach those levels, but to chip in a couple of goals in this Champions League stage would really accelerate the conversation.
Yeah, and I think he'll have that ambition himself. I mean, this is rather harsh, but I've said before that if we'd peaked Moussa Dembele in the team last season, we'd probably qualify out of that group at the very least, in Europa, if not out into the Champions League knockouts. But part of it is Kyogo learning as well. He's a relatively late starter as far as pro football goes. He's been playing pro for 4 or 5 years, something like that.
More than that now, but I think, unlike kids that break in at 17 and 18 here, he went to university, same as Rio Hatate. Doesn't really start playing senior football till around about 21, 22, so maybe 6, 7 years. Yeah,
so there's that. So I think last year was a big part of his development, and he really feels it when he knows he should have, maybe tucked something away. And he's not the kind of guy that, gets angry or frustrated, right? He just goes, I know how to be better. I'm just going to go away and work on it and work hard. I mean, you saw how he finished last year. Whilst he didn't score those Champions League goals, he took that kind of frustration right into the league, and everyone felt it. All the opposition felt it. And he'll have spent his summer further developing on that, spent his pre-season doing the same. We're going to see the best of him.
I said at the time last year, yes, I'm sure he's felt the pain of not scoring Champions League-wise and turned that into a positive. I think it was mostly his rejection from the Japan World Cup squad which spurred them on. You've all seen the video. It brings me to tears. It shows you him crestfallen. He's at home and he sees the news and he's devastated not to be part of that, and you can understand why. But he then used it to his advantage in that second half of the season, and to finish on 34 goals, Miff, it tells you exactly where he was at then, and it just looks like he's picked up where he left off. He's 4 goals so far this season.
Absolutely, that's the part of the reason why everyone rates him so highly and why he is regarded as the best since Larsson is not only to do with his output on the park, it's everything else that surrounds that. His attitude, how professional he is, the fact that he is a selfless teammate. I just love him, and it must have been so disappointing not to have made the Japan squad, but to react in the manner that he did, rather than sulk, rather than look for a move, maybe at a bigger league, as many would have done in that position. He's knuckled down and he's made our team better. So,
yep.
What more can we ask for?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll tell you what we can ask for though. We can ask for goals in Europe, and that's the crux of the matter here. So we've got 6 games coming up against Feyenoord, Lazio and Atletico. Question to you, Miff, then, what does success for Kyogo look like specifically in these games? Is it just you getting off the mark and getting one Champions League goal? Is it getting a few, maybe an assist? You know, what he'll set himself lofty targets and he won't reveal them to the public, but what do you think he'll be targeting?
Yeah, he'll be targeting goals because he's a striker, and no doubt he will himself want to score many goals in the Champions League. But for me, it's meaningful contributions that result in us qualifying in some form. That is success not only for the club but also for the players, and that extends beyond Kyogo.
I know, and he's a selfless kind of player, James, and I think if Celtic play these 6 games and he scores none, but he plays a huge part in getting us through, he'll be delighted as a good teammate. But I want to see him score goals, and I want him to get the reward for his efforts. He's now getting into his peak years, and if he's not going to do it in Europe now, when is he, is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think all good players of Kyogo's style and Kyogo's attitude, they definitely have team goals. You know, I'm going to contribute to the team, but strikers have individual goals as well. I think he'll be saying there's 6 games there, I can score against anyone, and I think he'll be targeting 6. I think he'll score 5 in the groups. Yep, that's my target.
That's a hell of a call. Miff, do you want to put a number on it?
Man, geez, that's because Big Paddy's not here, man. He's taking on Paddy's bravado.
That's the bravado.
We're going to win every game, ain't nothing. 3 goals.
Who was that impression? Was that James or Paddy you were doing?
That was just me. I couldn't do a Paddy impression. Jeez, can I go that low?
Yeah.
No, 3 goals.
3 goals. I'm going to go for that as well. I think he'll get goals, and what I think could be in our favour is the teams that we're playing against, generally speaking, they're going to come out and play open attacking football. We're not going to see anybody park the bus, and I just think, especially when you're away from home, it'll be interesting to see what happens here this week in Feyenoord, but especially away from home, he finds those spaces where others don't, and I think he's certainly going to get chances. He proved it last year, and it's up to him whether he then executes them.
Yep.
I think that's kind of the biggest difference for us in Europe. I know last year didn't yield magnificent results, but I think the dynamic of Kyogo is what makes us interesting in Europe, because what we'll have, and certainly not, we haven't seen a lot of it this year, certainly not in the games at Celtic Park, where teams sitting against you and, you know, low block, back to my famous low block, with space to run into. I think that's what the team enjoyed so much last year, was that they were able to be creative and counter-attack quickly. But the way that Kyogo plays just gives us that different dynamic. I know that he's been dropping deep in domestic games, but I think he'll be playing in the shoulder when we go away in the Champions League, and that's exciting.
You've also got a thriving Matt O'Reilly not playing the 6. You know, he's going to be playing a more attacking role. When McGregor picked up his injury, you know, early on in the Champions League campaign, it meant you're losing McGregor first and foremost, but then you're losing the dynamic positivity of O'Reilly. That's not the case.
I think what you've also got to take into consideration, some guys are just pure strikers. That's all they do, and that's not a bad thing to be if all you can do is score goals. But he's definitely got more to his game, and he's shown that with his assist. I thought his assist to Matt O'Reilly on Saturday was a real case in point. He was off the shoulder, you know, he was right on the last man, and it's Johnson that's found him down the right hand side.
Man of the match.
He bends the run just so well and gets on the end of it, but he's then at the byline with a bit of work to do. A lot of guys would just flash it across the face of goal, and you know what, and you couldn't criticise him. It's not a bad thing to do. Just get it in a busy area and see what happens. Yep. He's just got the awareness and the vision to say, I know Matt O'Reilly's going to be coming here, and O'Reilly himself has shown nice timing as well, just to step onto it. And I'm not saying O'Reilly couldn't miss, but he's put it on a plate for his teammate there, and it shows that vision. It's
a very similar chance to 2 of the ones that O'Reilly had against
St Johnstone. 3.
The one that bounced up was a bit of a game, that one. So again, I think it says a lot about O'Reilly, the composure that he showed. It could have been very easy to snatch at that, but he just trusted his technique, and it was a great finish.
Yeah, he spoke about that. You know, that's part of Rodgers' kind of training with him, is to just be running and then hold back, because the defenders keep going. Your partner, Kyogo in this case, knows that you're doing that. Nobody else knows that, and he's getting great positions with it.
A smart cutback is so hard to deal with. All the defenders, as you say, James, are all rushing towards their own goal, and they can't get the brakes on in time by the time it gets cut back. And it was great to see, but I think just to stay on Kyogo, it just shows where he's at. He's a selfless player. You know, he's absolutely, you know, driven by his goals. Of course he is, but if he sees a teammate in a better space, he'll give it to him more often than not. Apart from at Ibrox when he should have cut one back for a batter. But bad example. He's got that to offer. So as much as I'm banging on here about how
he does it every time, apart from when he doesn't.
60% of the time he does it every time.
He's got to shoot himself down.
But I'm talking about the fact that here, I'm hoping that he can, get on the ladder goals wise, Champions League goals wise. He's done it in Europa League. He needs to score at this top level. But it isn't just all what he's about. He does have that ability to bring teammates into the game, and that's a huge asset, and it's a huge asset to Rodgers, because Celtic will find themselves under spells of pressure, certainly in the away games and potentially at Celtic Park at times as well. But he's an outball first and foremost. He'll get you up the park. But the fact that he's got the creativity to bring others into the game, he's just a very rounded forward. He's not just a big number 9. You just stick him up front and you see what you get. And we talked about those various players: Dembele, Edward, Jan Vennegoor. They've all got their different skill sets. Kyogo's got much more to his bow, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's not just a hit-it striker. There's some excellent strikers you've mentioned in there, and they were just lethal in front of the goal. But probably not so much. If they were going to be a bit wide of the 6-yard box either side, you probably wouldn't find them in that area much. But Kyogo will be, and he can be there to deadly effect. He just is that selfless kind of character. But it's like you say, he's got very, very quick analysis of the situation as it is. So that when he cut back to O'Reilly, if he sees that he's got a strong chance of scoring from where he is, he's having his shot, but he's analysed that and went, I know what this guy is. There's a higher potential for him to score than me in this situation with the box being so crowded. So it's his intelligence that comes into it as well.
Yeah. So just to round this chat off, Miff, I'll come to you for the last word. Do you feel that now is the time, based on what we've seen him, I think we've seen him improve quite dramatically in his time. And listen, he hit the ground running at Celtic, scored a couple of early hat-tricks, but he's just got better and better. The fact that he signed a new deal till 2027 just shows he's in a good place. He's enjoying himself, he's comfortable, he has a talisman. When you're looking for the guy that's going to make the difference, you're excited that you see Kyogo fit and ready and available. He struggled at times in his career at Celtic from a couple of injuries, couple of knocks, and not quite being ready. Right now, save the shoulder niggle, because he's managing that just fine. He's flying. He's high as a kite. He's confident. He's scoring goals. And to answer the question, is now the time when he's going to step up for us?
Yes, I believe so. I can't see him going through the Champions League campaign not scoring. Certainly not in the form that he's in.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting time. So we'll start this week with Feyenoord. He's got 6 games to go. He's got 5 goals to get for James's target. Me and Miff are going 3, so let's see where he lands. If you were unsure if we were a team in transition or not, Saturday saw debuts for a third of our 9 summer signings, as Nat Phillips, Lewis Palmer and Paulo Bernardo all made their first appearances in the hoops. So how did they do? James, let's start with Nat Phillips. What's your early impressions of the Liverpool loanee?
Early days. He's shown he's a top-rate defender. As much as he wasn't up against top-rate attackers, what he had to deal with, I think his stats came out that he won all these duels, he won all these headers, all these kind of things. The side that maybe let him down a wee bit on Saturday was his passing, but I was really no problem with it. He was trying a lot of passes. I think he had something like 10, 12, 14 passes, positive attacking passes, and it's just a matter of him first of all finding his range, finding a bit of comfort that he's going to have space on the ball. He's not played football since January. There's a lot comes into it, so I wouldn't be judging him that at all. We'll wait and see, as time goes on. He's going to get a lot of football between now and between Carter Vickers and Navarocki coming back, so there's plenty of time for all of that. I thought it was an excellent debut, but more from a defensive side than an attacking side.
What I think is very interesting. So I wouldn't agree it's an excellent debut. I think that's too lofty in its praise, just in my opinion. I think, but what you've got as a Celtic defender is just a very unique situation. You're against Dundee at home on Saturday, where you're getting loads of the ball. I think Celtic finished with 78% possession, something like that. And centre halves are allowed to venture pretty deep into the opposition half without even getting tackled. The front two for Dundee just retreat. Easy for me to say. And then when he's about 40 yards out, they then start to engage. And at that point, that's when he's passing, let him down a wee bit. Mm-hmm. And maybe he's not used to that. Maybe he's thinking, why isn't nobody tackling me here? So his distribution wasn't great, but that's fine. He's rusty. He's not played since January, and he'll get there. But then you go to Rotterdam on Tuesday night, where you play a very decent Feyenoord side who are going to give you nothing like that time on the ball first and foremost. And actually, you're going to spend most of your time back the way doing the defensive job. And it's life at Celtic, isn't it? It's Dundee at home 1 week, lion's share of possession. Then you go and play a Champions League game where it's almost the opposite game, if not quite as dramatic as that, but very different for a centre half like Phillips to deal with.
Central halfback.
Well said, Tino.
Thanks, Smith.
It's you're right in what you say. It's life at Celtic, but I like James. I didn't have too much of a problem with the intent that Philip showed. I think we've been crying out for a centre half to really drive into the space that's created, because opposition players are just so worried about doubling up on our wide players, or making sure that our midfielders aren't running beyond the defence, or are getting any pockets of space in between.
They were surrounding McGregor. They were really doubling McGregor. Yeah. So when you look at that and you see the space it's created, but quite simply, the other team, the opposition team, don't have anybody designated to go and shut the centre half down. So they are literally like a spare man. So the further up the park they go, the more likely they are to kind of pull somebody out of position. I just thought the intent was there, but a couple of times they seemed to just get a bit muddled of, alright, I've went a lot further than maybe I expected here. What will I do? And actually, it went that far, he'd shut off the angles of passes out to Yang or into O'Reilly's feet. He tried a few switches as well that didn't quite go to plan because he just hit them too hard. But again, the intent was there, and it was actually the right ball to play at the time. So just with a bit more game time and a bit increased confidence, I think that actually would be a really useful tool for Celtic, a really useful weapon for them to use at home. You're quite right to point out Champions League will be very, very different. You're not going to just get to swagger up across the halfway line under no pressure. But I still think it's very, very important for whoever plays at centre half to be using the ball really effectively, and also be willing to carry the ball forward. Just Tuesday night's game is just a completely different game.
It really is. In terms of a debut, I think, real scope for optimism. James, you'd mentioned that the plan would probably have been to give him an hour and then rest him for there, but he rolled his ankle at some point in the first half, so Lagerbielke comes in at half time. But just on that note, fitness wise, I think it's just a wee niggle, and he'll certainly be in contention for Feyenoord. This chat will be dated. Some people will be listening to this on Wednesday morning, which is fine. Tune in earlier, lads. It's on a Tuesday. But does he get the start for you? And if so, who against? Who with?
Against Feyenoord.
Against Feyenoord, makes sense.
I think he definitely starts. I think the planning has shown you that he's going to start. He started the game. They had a game management time of 60 minutes for him. You wouldn't be doing that unless you were planning on putting him in. I think it's, as much as you're saying it flips from a Dundee style of game for a centre half to Feyenoord. He's going to thrive on the Feyenoord side more than the Dundee side, because it's defending that he thrives on. So I think he'll be really looking for it. When did he really see himself, being a regular first pickish, type player in the Champions League? So he's there now. So he's got all the reasons to go and enjoy it.
Yeah, so he's played Champions League football for Liverpool. He stepped in, I think, when Van Dijk got his bad injury in the 2020-21 season. So he's got that bit of experience, but he also had options in the summer there. And one of the big carrots that we can dangle is the fact that we've got Champions League football. I'm sure he enjoyed his debut well enough, but he's not here for Dundee games. He's here to play in the Champions League, and he'll be buzzing at the prospect of featuring in some of these group games, Miff.
Absolutely. That's why we're able to attract somebody like Nat Phillips to come to Celtic. I agree. I think the reviews of him from Liverpool fans, from what I see, mainly positive, which is quite unusual when he's probably fifth or sixth choice centre half for them. Probably should have moved on from Liverpool before now, because he's clearly a decent enough player. But
I think there's 50,000 reasons a week why he's not moved on.
Aye, fair enough. But happy enough with what I've seen in the Dundee game. But yeah, this is why he's here, and this is why we've signed him. We ourselves were a bit desperate for a bit of cover to come in. I think you'd made the point earlier, Tino, around the three centre halves in contention with starting were probably never really considered to be anywhere near first team when Rodgers first came through the door. But we've ended up in the situation we have. Let's just see what we go with. I mean, the fact that we're going here starting with Liam Scales at centre half, I would assume we're going to be starting with Liam Scales at centre half. I would assume so.
I think so.
Because I think do you think so? Because I think he's played his way into it. He's done admirably well when called upon.
Yeah. We'll find out in due course if he starts, but I think overall there's certainly reasons for optimism. He's a big, powerful guy. I've mentioned a few times he's 6'3", and I think he could do just fine. But you're right, Miff, whether it's Phillips, Scales, Lagerbielke, once everybody's fit and firing, CCV and Navrocki bump them down the pecking order, and none of the three of them would generally be considered. But we are where we are. They're professional footballers. They find themselves at Celtic for whatever reason, and they should be talented enough to go and do something. So it wouldn't be your first choice, but let's see how they fare at Feyenoord and beyond. You know, they've got a real tough task on their hands, but let's see how they do. My second guy to look at is Lewis Palmer. I think we've all been quite excited about him. He made a scoring. Was it his debut? I think that's wrong. But he scored for Honduras, is my point, albeit a penalty during the week. And he also had an assist, and he came back full of confidence. He was on the bench, he was sub not used at Ibrox, and you could tell that the guy was just buzzing to get involved. He comes into the fray around about 60 minutes in, and he just looked like he wanted to make an impact and to make things happen.
Yeah, I think we all get excited by YouTube videos and the like, but you want to see it with your own eyes. You want to judge a player, just how they approach the ball, touch, etc. And he definitely looked the part around that. Like I say, I felt he kind of squared the Dundee fullback up a couple of times and looked like he was just going to go by them, and it was almost like he tripped over the ball a couple of times. But his use of the ball in general was really, really good. Pretty safe, I would say, but he just looks like he's got to be a very good football player. But I was surprised at a really, really athletic build. He looked a lot more wiry in the videos that I'd seen, but it looks like he's got a good bit of muscle about him as well.
Yeah, I think he's quite a powerful looking character. James, there was a wee nutmeg towards the latter stages, which just showed I suppose a sign of his confidence and skill. He doesn't look like a young man that's lacking confidence, and I think if you're to be that guy that's got, we've talked a lot about the star quality, and a huge part of that's gone out the door with Jota. We've lost that bit of magic that a guy like that can give you. And I know it's early bells. I know we've just seen half an hour plus the YouTube compilations, but I think a lot of fans are excited that Palmer could be that star man.
I think he could be. That nutmeg shows that he wants to entertain, like Jota wanted to entertain, but effectively. He wants to get past his man, and he seems to have a really strong awareness, of not just getting past his own guy, but where his colleagues are, where he's giving the ball to. It is early doors, but if anyone's going to be filling the Jota shoes, it's him.
Yeah, definitely. And as everyone knows, Miff, nutmegs are almost as good as goals, and they should count for something.
Yes, for some.
Last guy, James, is Paulo Bernardo. Again, another guy who's seriously rated in his homeland. So Benfica apparently dug deep to make sure there was a similarly high sell-on value if Celtic go and do what they've done with Jota. He plays regularly for Portugal's under-21s. He played 2 games during the break, and we've seen less of him. He came on, I think, in the 73rd minute. But we've spoken again about how sometimes just the way a guy receives the ball and how he plays it out his feet and how he carries the ball indicates that he's a pretty decent player, and I think that's exactly what we've seen from Bernardo.
He looks like a classy player, yeah. Real vision, both in terms of where to be, but he'd a shot on goal that was not too far away. What a debut it had been, but he looks like a classy player, doesn't he?
Yeah, excited to see more. Here's a question then. So we've mentioned the 3 of them there, Phillips, Palmer, Bernardo. When everyone's fully fit, there's a real challenge for these guys, and that's up to them. So I think Phillips would be maybe 4th or 5th choice centre-half at the moment. He might bump up, depending on what he does in the next few weeks. Bernardo, not due to what he's doing, but Celtic have got a very busy and very talented midfield. He might also be 4th or 5th choice. Palmer's a bit different. Now that Jota's out the door, Abada's unfortunate to pick up his injury. I think Palmer could very soon, cement his place as a mainstay. Quick question, and we've covered it with Phillips already, but Bernardo and Palmer, do you think either might start against Feyenoord?
Palmer would be the most likely for me. I can't see Bernardo start.
I'd agree with that, James. Is that where you are?
No, I don't think either will start. I think part of, we didn't get to see it on Saturday if he could or he couldn't, but if you're going to displace Maeda in the left wing, you need to show me your defensive qualities as well as your attacking, because that's what happens. Maeda get pushed over to the right. So I think Yang will start for that reason, because we can't not have Dyson in his best spot. I know you can suggest that Dyson can do both wings. He can, but he's best on the left. So if Palmer comes in and shows that he can do that, or he can develop that side of his game, then yeah, I think he's going to start more games than not. I think he's a real talent, and he's the winger we want, but he's got to be able to do that defensive stuff too.
I had a wee inkling, James, that Palmer might get the nod against Feyenoord, but thinking it through, and we done the countdown to kick-off, the pre-match show earlier on at Celtic Exchange Plus, I think Yang has spent the last number of weeks now working with Rodgers, getting to know the system, working the training pitch, getting to know the shape. And I think Lou Palmer looks like maybe moving forward he'll be the man, but I think at this moment in time it might just be too soon to slot him in. Not sure where he's at fitness-wise, he looks pretty lively, but I think we might see Jan get the nod, and that might be the right move. And you're right, Miff, Bernardo, talented as he looks, too soon for him to break into that very congested midfield. But overall, pretty positive signs for all three guys. We'll see what they bring in the coming weeks. Another wee update you might have seen is that Marco Tilio continues his rehab, and he was pictured in training there at Celtic Park today, so hopefully we see the likes of him and even Kwon a wee bit more moving forward. It's now time for the 11th man, where all you need to do is name the missing player from a well-known Celtic lineup. Last week you nailed it by naming Brian McLaughlin as the 11th man from Celtic's lineup in the 1995 Scottish Cup final, so well done to you both, Miff. I was really pleased for you. This week, as we head into our first European group game of the season, it's a pretty topical lineup. It's a lineup from Ange's first European group game as Celtic manager back on the 16th of September 2021, as Celtic took on Real Betis in the opening game in our Europa League campaign. Finished Celtic 3, Betis 4, but James, you'd mentioned it, that was the day where Jota referenced as the day when things started to click and they started to believe in Ange's system. So I'll read out the team for the day. There'll be a missing guy, and it's up to you lads to name the missing man. Joe Hart, Tony Ralston, Josip Juranovic, Karl Starfelt, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Ismail Assoro, David Turnbull, Tom Rogic, Blank, Albion Ayeti and Jota. Have a wee think while we play you this short message. While the guys are figuring that one out, a short reminder that if you like what we do here at the Celtic Exchange, then you can hear even more from us throughout the week by joining the Celtic Exchange Plus. At the Celtic Exchange Plus, we provide pre- and post-match podcasts for every Celtic game, as well as a number of other exclusive subscriber benefits. All you have to do is visit thecelticexchange.com/plus right now for full details and to start your free trial. More podcasts, more reaction, more Celtic, all on the Celtic Exchange Plus. So what we'll do, we'll reveal the answer just a wee bit later on in the show, but have you any guesses to throw at me at the moment? Okay.
Odsonne Edward.
Odsonne Edward.
Yeah.
No correct answer so far. Do you want to have another couple of shots?
Right, give me a
Liam Shaw, Urigidi.
That might be a good guess. We'll find out later in the show. So, decent guess. It's such a tricky one. I was actually going to do a lineup from the Scottish Cup final just at the end of last season, but it was going to be too easy. So I've tried to give you a chance there. Some good guesses, and we'll find out later in the show who's got the right answer. By the time some people listen to this episode, our first group game of this season's Champions League will have been and gone. We'll see what we get against Feyenoord at De Kuip, but out with that, let's see what can be viewed as success for Celtic in Europe this season. James, what do you view as success out of our group campaign?
I think with all things considered, transfer window activity and the failures therein, getting out of the group into Europa would be success for me. Getting out of the group into the last 16 of the Champions League would be massive overachievement and phenomenal work from the manager and the players that are there. I think Celtic have made a lot of good signings, but the two areas we really needed to strengthen was left back and striker. We didn't, and that is going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact tomorrow night. They'll be targeting Greg Taylor in that role that he doesn't like playing. He wants to play that inverted role, and we're light up top. So with all those things considered, getting into Europa, happy with that.
You might be right. We may well be pretty well set up in terms of the domestic challenges we'll face this season. Out with the League Cup, we didn't want to win that anyway. But Europe's a different question, isn't it? And there's a real challenge there, and maybe we've fallen a bit short. Time will tell. Miff, I'll give you three options. So option one, Celtic compete like Ange's team done last season, but ultimately fail. 2 points out of the 6 games wasn't enough to qualify for anything. Or we could come third place and get that spot in the Europa League, as James mentioned. Or, top prize, it's really competing and really pushing for a place top 2 and then moving into the knockout stages of the group. What do you think's realistic, for this Celtic side?
Like James says, I think the transfer window and the way it went sort of kind of came as a bit of a surprise to most Celtic fans, I would say. I don't think we expected us to be so hapdash with the signings or take as long as we did to get some signings over the line.
Or to spend so little.
And also not to strengthen those two particular areas that you mentioned. I think you'd probably even throw goalkeeper in there as well. You'd have expected some genuine competition to have come in for that. All those things considered, it's made me realign. Had Ange still been here, I would have said absolutely qualifying is the only metric for success. Well,
book up for Wembley. Get
the tickets booked, lads. But now, I think James mentioned this weeks ago where he said you're probably almost back to that learning under Rodgers stage of trying to just go and compete. But what's happened since is the draw's been made, and whilst it's not an easy draw by any means, it's not as hard as it could have been or difficult as it could have been. And with all those things considered, I'm just going to say the exact same thing that he said.
What did he say?
Europa.
My head is somewhere between second and third. You know, second and a half isn't something that exists, but I just think, but maybe it's, you know, again, it's the hope rather than expectation. But I mean, to finish fourth again would be so disappointing. And I think with guys like Kyogo and guys like O'Reilly, McGregor at his peak, we've got guys that can go and have an impact. And to your point, Miff, it is a favourable draw, right? It's not an easy draw. No draw in the Champions League is going to be easy, but it is favourable. And I actually think the group is wide open, and all four clubs will be thinking along those lines. And I just think if Celtic get it right, if the manager gets it right, if the big players turn up, you know, on the big occasions, then Celtic can get something out of this.
Yeah, everyone in that group can finish fourth, including us, and someone's going to.
Everyone can finish first.
Exactly, that's what I mean. It's such a competitive group. There's going to be points won and lost all over the place. So, and I think you'll look at it. Not that we can, but if you were to look from a neutral's point of view, after the 6 games, it'll probably be one of the most exciting groups because there's not, you know, that chasm that you really get. I know it's like you'll pay crazy money and, you know, they're playing La Liga, but it's not Real Madrid, it's not Barcelona. You know, it just brings it a wee bit closer. Not much closer, but closer. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be exciting. And if we had just a wee bit more cover, I'd be more confident in saying, yeah, you know, the second is genuinely realistic. And if Ange hadn't done what he did, then I think we'd have been in a position of just to build on for the third season. So not to be, and we are where we are. And I think there's obviously an excellent manager there, and he's got most of the players he wants. And what we're seeing of those players, we're starting to enjoy, and it's all starting to come together. So Champions League maybe a wee bit early for us. I'd have loved a week or two more of developing that team, but let's go on it.
Unfortunately, I work with a Spurs fan. He's in love.
I was talking to one last night. Same.
It's hard to watch.
You know, Floydie.
It's hard to watch.
They're absolutely buzzing, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think I seen something. Is it Gary Lineker I was interviewing him this morning? And they're fawning over him. I said to James this morning, though, we done the Feyenoord pre-match, and Andrew's rolling out all the same lines he gave us. He was basically saying, he got asked a question about should Spurs fans, you know, just temper their enthusiasm a wee bit and just calm down. He's like, hey, it's not my job to tell them to dare to dream, go and dream high and dream big. And I thought, he told us that.
He's the guy that always takes.
And he was right.
He was right.
He's the guy that always takes his dates to the same restaurant. You know, there's no deviation. There's no imagination.
My favourite's right, and he's always right. It's
Move
tough to let
on.
go. I will move on. I want to talk just briefly about some of the figures involved if you do manage to make decent progress in the Champions League. So I knew it was along these lines, but I checked again today. €2.8 million for any sort of group win. That is decent money. You rack up a couple of wins and everyone's happy there. 900 grand for a draw, so that translates to 2.4 million sterling, 775 grand. And for reaching the round of 16, if you manage to get to the round of 16, €9.6 million. That's off the charts money. I didn't realise it was just quite so high. So there's the obvious, you know, the glory from a footballing point of view, but what you can do with that kind of income as well, if they decide to spend and buy left backs and strikers, of course. Huge figures involved, and there's a real incentive there, Miff, to try and rack up better than the 2 draws we got last time.
Absolutely. What was your exchange rate there?
I don't know. The Google told me the exchange rate was 2.4 million sterling to €2.8 million.
Excellent. Right. That's why it's so important that we're there. The lack of any significant TV revenue means that we're in an immediate disadvantage. What we are lucky that we have is a very, very loyal and willing fan base to support the club week in, week out, season in, season out. That allows us to at least maintain or sustain our financial advantage over the rest of the league. But for us to compete at a European level, we need to continually be in the Champions League just to reinvest that into the squad. But however, this transfer window doesn't really see it. Feels like we've been cheated a wee bit.
At some point, Celtic are going to have to make that step change, right? Because what you know, you're talking about millions here and millions there, and you know, maybe selling that player and Jota money and blah blah blah. It's just sitting in a Scrooge McDuck bank vault doing nothing. Do you know what I mean? They just sit and look at it every other day and go,
everybody just
dive
picture
in.
them doing the dive into the coins.
look at all the money. And just like, well, get out. You know, it's very poor management for any business. I would even say neglectful of your fiduciary responsibility to have cash in the bank and not out in the market buying assets that are going to make you better players, better teams, more progress, and that perpetuates itself. And I know Celtic are nervous, you know, with making this kind of step change, but it's going to have to come at some point.
A frightening summary, James. Well done. Impressive to hear.
For Exchange Plus subscribers, Myths Dictionary Corner.
Oh, it's been away. Bring it back.
Fiduciary. That's the one you were thinking of, wasn't it?
Well, it certainly perpetuates.
James, just a question to follow on from that though, and maybe the answer is as simple as sign better players, sign a left back, sign a striker. But the question is, what, if anything, can Celtic do, generally speaking, to become more competitive in Europe?
You answered your own question.
Is it just that? You know, it's not develop our own players.
No,
it's
attitudinal across the board. You know, it's not just the board and the players and the manager. It's Celtic as an organisation need to go, right, we're not there anymore, we're here, or we want to be there, have that ambition and have a plan to reach that stage. It's got to come all through the organisation rather than just, well, here's we hope we get there kind of thing. So I think Celtic need to change the attitude of the whole club, top to bottom.
We are in effect hamstrung by your absolute desire to be better.
But if you're playing, what is it going to be, like 20% of your games in the Champions League coming next year if you qualify out?
If you qualify, you've guaranteed 8 games next season. So 8 of your whatever 45.
No, if you qualify
games
out of that, you get another 2. So it's 10 of your
games, yep.
10 of your 40, 50 games kind of thing.
20%.
So
games.
20%. So you start to become a European Super League kind of thing where you're actually that's where you're really playing your football. And to practice for that, and I know this is sounding patronising to Scottish football, but to practice for that, you play in Scotland.
Well, the effect of cutting me off during a sentence is now I can't remember the point I was going to make.
Sorry,
something about fiduciary.
That's tragic for the listeners. Tragic.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been a good point, but
it would have been. I was confident it was going to be.
I'm going to listen back to it and I'll call you tonight.
Thank you.
But it was, the main question, if it triggers anything, was that, what can Celtic do to become more competitive in Europe? And is it just a case of resetting your ambitions?
Sorry, that come back to me. Our ambitions as a fan base mainly are to beat Rangers. That is
true.
For the vast majority, it's to beat Rangers. It's the be all and end all. So for turning around, you mentioned developing young players. To develop young players, you would need to go through a relatively long period of results being indifferent to allow them to gain the first team experience they needed. And you can go and send them out on loan if you want, but unless you're sending them out on loan to Man United or Arsenal or Man City, they're not going to get the same understanding of pressure. And we'll take Mikey Johnson as a great example of somebody who just seems to have lost that ability to play at Celtic Park. You can see him almost going to a wee shell. A cracking player, ability not in doubt, but mentally, psychologically, he's just not there to be able to come back and play at the level that he could play at previously. So that's the effect of having kids that we're developing. The talent, we're spotting talent in kids. Somebody like McGregor's a bit of a freak. You don't really get Callum McGregor's coming through every season. That would be fantastic. But we as Celtic fans want it all. We want to beat Rangers, we want to compete in Europe, we want to develop our own players. Like you say, it will require a complete cultural mindset change to say, do you know what? See, whatever Rangers are doing, it doesn't matter. This is the 10-year path that we're on, and we're going to stick to it. However, get beaten 3 successive cup finals off Rangers, and you can just stick a grenade in your 10-year plan and go away to hell with that. Get in the players that we need to know because we need to beat them, and that's what it comes down to. That's why it's so difficult to juggle. But just now, the tipping point is completely out of kilter because we're beating Rangers and that's fine. We have the opportunity where domestically we've kind of got that stuff almost handled. Let's roll the dice and maybe invest in slightly higher tier of player that would normally go for, or from a position of strengthen areas we know need strengthened, and we've not done it.
Yeah, I think that is because there isn't what you're suggesting, like a 10-year cultural shift. To your point on losing to Rangers in cup finals, if you're setting the bar so much higher and setting the wage base so much higher and you're really competing in Europe, you're not really going to lose those games anyway. Football's football, and you'll lose the odd, cup game here and there, and that's fine. But it's not going to be 3 in a row and stuff like that. It'll be like COVID, where anomalies can happen, and that was an anomaly.
What you do have, I'm sure Celtic have got their short-term goals, their medium-term and their long-term. But
I don't know if they do. I don't know if they're as switched on as that at the moment.
I think they are. I think you just like having your wee bite at the board. I think they are. But you've got a short-term thing where, as Miff makes the point, and I see myself in this. Miff talks about being better than Rangers is the be-all and end-all. It's almost that for me. Being better than Rangers is a priority for me. Right, I'll put it up there pretty high up in the charts. But I also want to see us do well in Europe. So, and I'm sure, everyone at the club does, and the board and the management and those who make the long-term plans, but they kind of jar with each other. Your short to medium-term plan of just beating Rangers, Miff says you need to sacrifice some of that if you want to build longer term. You might need some bumpy 3-4 seasons as you develop your new youngsters and take a different approach, and you kind of can't have both. And we're in this just wholly unique world. You mentioned it, James. We've got this situation where your training ground for top level European games is playing against some teams like Dundee and Livingston and teams that will park the bus. Now that's not completely unique, because there's Feyenoord will play some dross in their league. There'll be teams sitting at the bottom of the Dutch league, I'm sure.
Were abysmal.
Yeah,
that's who they're playing.
A team called Almere City that I've never heard of. They beat 5-1. There's lots of that going on, but you throw into the mix this added carrot of just always beating Rangers. I don't care what happens as long as we beat Rangers. That's where a lot of us are, maybe myself included. And it's just such a tricky position, and it doesn't allow for long-term thinking. So in conclusion, James, am I the problem?
On many things. The caveat I would say to that is, yes, you can't get that without tricky years usually, but you've got 60 million cash in the bank just now, which means you probably can invest ahead. Normally you would have to just invest from youth and let that come through, but you can use that cash to have a really, really strong wage base that allows you to have the odd youngster coming through as well.
Yeah, it's a big question, big debate, and we're running a wee bit low on time, and we'll pick it up again at another stage. But final summary, Miff, just on what's acceptable this season. We've all got our ambitions. You guys are sitting about potentially third. I'm hoping for second. But what would be acceptable? What would allow you to say, okay, that's where we're at just now based on everything that went on this summer?
I think, wherever it leaves us, but getting a couple of wins in the group stage is great. Winning the league to make sure that we're in that larger draw. That's what I think we're on record is saying that as well. The transfer window's kind of tempered enthusiasm a wee bit, but that's done. We've got our squad now. Everybody's there. They're bought in. Rodgers is working with them. Let's see what the results are.
Yeah, exactly. So with a bit of luck, Celtic will pick up something this week at Feyenoord. You might, as I say, might be listening to this on Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll find out. But myself and James Miff, we've done the countdown to kick off. We predicted 2 each. We were both exactly the same. Do you want to put a scoreline on it just to add to the mix?
1-1.
1-1. We'd all take that, wouldn't we? Any sort of score draw. So you can listen to the build up right now at the Celtic Exchange Plus. Just visit thecelticexchange.com for more details if you aren't already signed up. Just before I get your final thoughts, lads, the answer to this week's 11th man, there was a few guesses. Thomas came in with Mikey Johnson. It's a decent shout. I think you had Edward. James, was it yourself though that came good with Adam Montgomery, which is the correct answer? I didn't think you would get it. I'm a wee bit annoyed at that.
I thought the boys were right with Mikey, but it was because you said you'll never get it, and we know you love Mikey. I'm
my own worst enemy. Just on Adam Montgomery, I was having a look around just when I realised he was the answer. He's on loan at Bruni's Fleetwood Town, where Bruni isn't there anymore. So.
He's got Lee Johnson, a man of similar stature. But
he's not playing much game time at all. I don't know if there's any sort of injury there, but he wasn't in the squad at the weekend, and he's played something like 34 minutes. So again, Miff, to go back to the prior question, if Celtic are to develop boys like Adam Montgomery, they need more than half an hour here and there at Fleetwood Town if they're good enough. So maybe ties into a bigger picture. But we'll get to that at some later stage. James, final comments as we start to wrap up this week's show.
First of all, apologies for interrupting Miff. That won't happen again. It will happen again.
But
I'll try and remember what you're saying when I do interrupt you.
I just put me back on track.
So, here we go. Champions League football. We can talk about broader season ambitions and stuff, but see when the tournament starts, you're just in it for the games and you're going to look to win every game. So, just wish I was in Rotterdam. We'll pick it up in Madrid, but yeah, it looks like a great tie to be at.
Yeah, want to enjoy. My final word of the day goes to you.
Like James says, you can go with your low expectations and all that nonsense, but when it rolls round to kick-off time, you're like, come on. Well, we've got 3 points the night, and then you never know, we win our next time game. So, the excitement's there. this is why we are so obsessed with winning the league, not only to beat Rangers like we discussed, but so that we are on this stage, so we have these nights to look forward to, so you can get absolutely stung for your Champions League package, and so that you can just enjoy these nights. And hopefully we do enjoy these nights. That's the key for me. I've been on record the same before. Rodgers' tenure, some of the displays were a wee bit flaky. I think we've got a group now where we can hopefully go and express ourselves and have Parkhead, Celtic Park, Parkers absolutely bouncing. That's what we want.
Yeah, some exciting times ahead, starting with Tuesday night in Rotterdam. So that wraps things up on this latest episode of the Celtic Exchange Weekly. Thanks to Miff and James for joining us today, and to Thomas, who joined us in the studio. And as always, our thanks to you for tuning in. We'll be back with the Celtic Exchange Weekly this time next week, but don't forget you can enjoy more podcasts, more reaction and more Celtic every week at the Celtic Exchange Plus, where this week alone we'll have 4 additional shows in the shape of pre and post match episodes for the Feyenoord game, as well as Saturday's league match with Livingston. Just visit thecelticexchange.com/plus right now to get involved. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again very soon.